It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
All right, Brian. So we've talked about our 20s. We've talked about the folks that are just starting out, beginning on their wealth building journey. Now let's talk about the 30s, because this is the decade that we call the messy middle. Life is starting to move really, really fast, and it's easy to take our eye off the ball of building financial independence. We have to make sure that even when we have all these different things pulling us in all these different directions, we remember saving is important and our dollars still have juice, even in our 30s, that can have huge impacts later in life.
When I see this headline, it makes me think of the Ferris Bueller's quote, but it is one of those things where I just don't want you to get caught up, exactly what Bo said, into the messy middle, that you wake up 10, 15, 20 years in the future and you go, how did I miss out on all the opportunity of letting my army of dollar bills do all the hard work? So we do have some data points to share on how important your 30s are.
So first, let's do a little spot check, right? 401k balances in your 30s. According to Fidelity Investments, they surveyed all their 401k participants, and the average 401k balance for someone in their 30s is $50,800. So, it's better than the 20s. It's growing, so that's not bad. You can see kind of where you stand there. When we look at salary deferrals or participant contribution rates, the average for someone in their 30s is 8.3%. So it has improved from their 20-year-old counterparts, but we're still not at that 20 to 25%. Remember, that's our goal. We want to be saving 20 to 25% of our gross income. Our 30-year-olds are doing a little better, but they're not quite there yet. And then if you want kind of a spot check as you think about closing out the 30s decade, where should you be from an overall portfolio, overall saving standpoint? By the time you get to the end of your 30s decade, you want to have about 2.5 times your annual income saved up. So whatever you're making at age 39 or 40, multiply it by 2.5, and that is where your total portfolio should be, according to Fidelity Investments.
And I want to give a little context on this because we just finished the 20s, but I know we break these into highlight videos at some point. Realize when you come into your 30s, you're hoping you have 1.2 times your income. You close out your 30s at 2.6 times your income. So you're hoping that you come into the decade with probably 1 times your income, but you leave it with close to 3 times.
That's huge.
You've got to let your army of dollar bills build. And let's kind of talk about, let's put some numbers to this. If you're saving, if you're a 30-something and you're saving at least 15%, you can replace 60% of your working wages when you retire in the future. That's how powerful even your dollars are at 30. If you're a financial mutant and you're saving at least 20% of your gross income, you will actually replace 81% of your working wages when you retire.
Now, what I think is beautiful here, Brian, is remember, what we did is we took the wage for a 30-year-old and we grew it at about 1.5% per year. So we're not talking about age 30 wages. We're actually talking about wages when you get to retirement. Well, if you're someone who saves 20%, right, and you're saving, that means that right off the cuff, you're living off of less than 80% of what you make, and you also have taxes and that sort of thing built in. So even if you're a 30-year-old and you haven't done anything in your 20s decade, but you're just starting, but you can commit to saving 20% of your income, you will still get a pay raise when you get to retirement. You can set it up so that you actually get to spend more in retirement than you did pre-retirement.
That's a great point because of taxes and retirement savings, but it's a slippery slope because you're going to see as you get older, these numbers are increasing pretty rapidly. By the time you're 35 years of age, you need to be saving 19% of your gross income to replace 60% of your retirement. And you can see that flows right over to what we're showing with if you save 20%, it's going to replace 62%. So you can see how those numbers kind of correlate. And then fast forward to when you're 39 years of age. Now here we are, we're getting really close to that hyper saving status that you need to be saving 24% of your gross income to replace 60%. And then if you're saving 20%, you just waited until 39 to start the retirement saving process, you can expect to replace just right under 50% of your working wages.
So I hope as you're kind of watching this, as you're kind of following this journey, you're recognizing that the sooner you start, the easier it is, the less burden there is, the less difficult it is to build wealth. The longer you wait to begin the process, the harder it becomes. The more disciplined you have to be, the more diligent you have to be. So the sooner you can figure this out, the better you're going to set yourself up for the long term. But just like our 20-year-old counterparts, folks in their 30s have some pitfalls they want to avoid. There are some things that can happen. There are some opportunities that exist. And unfortunately, we saw a lot of these last year in 2020 that can potentially derail your wealth building journey.
Yeah, the first one we kind of talk about here is taking money out of your retirement plans. Remember, these are assets that are supposed to serve you in financial independence. They are supposed to work for you when you're no longer working. So imagine what happens to the compounding growth process when you take 401k loans or you change jobs and you just, instead of rolling the money over and letting the army of dollars continue to work, if you go and put a swimming pool in the backyard, you have just taken money from your retirement for the swimming pool and really jeopardize how secure you'll be in the future.
That's one of the most heartbreaking things that I see, Brian. Is someone will change jobs and they'll get a notice that says, hey, you have left. Now you can do something with your old 401k. And without thinking, they just, oh, great. I'd saved up $20,000. I'm just going to take that. I just got a big bonus. Oh, okay, yeah, there's going to be taxes and penalties, but, I've got that money. That is awful, awful in terms of being a good general of your army of dollar bills. You cannot do that. So when you do leave a former employer, make sure you don't leave those accounts abandoned. Make sure you bring them with you and you don't cash them out. And make sure you don't let that 401k be a crutch that allows you to pay for your lifestyle when it should be paying for your retirement. Obviously, we said last year 401k loans are a thing where you can borrow money from your 401k. It takes dollars out of your army and puts them on the sidelines, and you have to pay it back, and you're paying interest on that loan, but it's not like you're making money. You're actually losing money because of the opportunity cost. You should not borrow, or I'd say steal, from your future self by taking 401k loans unless it is an absolute last resort.
Well, here's why I think these are siren songs, is that it sounds on the brochure so beneficial. It's like, look, I need money. Instead of taking debt from a bank or a credit card company, I'll go take it from my retirement account. And the good news is I'll just pay it back to myself. Yep. That's how this sounds great. What you don't recognize, though, is when you take that 401k loan, and let's just say it's $10,000. Sure. That $10,000 quit working for you.
That's right.
I mean, it's not only that you pulled the money out to kind of subsidize whatever's going on in your life. It's that $10,000 is no longer compounding and growing for you in the background, and that can have a multiplying effect in the long term for the decades as you approach retirement. And that's the part to pay attention to. And just to give you some perspective on this, we know from the research that 18% of participants are taking 401k loans. That's almost 1 in 5 are taking loans out of their 401ks, and I feel like a lot of that's probably to subsidize life, because I don't think 1 in 5 people are having annual emergencies. And by the way, this 18% stat was pre-COVID.
So it doesn't even include the CARES Act.
I get it, because last year was a unique year. It was a one-off year of some weird things going on. We all agree it was a weird, unique year. But pre-COVID, we still were close to 1 in 5 participants were taking loans on their 401ks. I don't like that. I think that's a failure for the long term.
The third pitfall that we noticed that a lot of folks in their 30s don't recognize is they don't think about Roth versus traditional. Now remember, the difference in Roth and traditional is if you do a traditional 401k contribution, you get a tax deduction, a tax benefit when you put the money in. It grows tax deferred, and then when you go to pull that money out in retirement, you have to pay tax on it. The Roth is a little bit different. You put the money in, you do not get a current year tax benefit, it still grows tax-free, and then when you go to pull it out, you don't pay any taxes on it at all. So it's really this equation between, do I want to pay taxes now or do I want to pay taxes later? Well, for someone in their 30s, if you think about tax-free growth over 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, they should get really, really excited about that. However, the statistics tell us a different story.
Well, I think it's interesting because now we're up to 74% of 401ks offer Roth opportunities.
I mean, that's 3 and 4 have a Roth 401k option.
That's the majority. Lion's share offer Roth now.
That people take advantage of that.
So imagine our surprise when we find out that only 13% of participants are actually taking this option.
And we're going to tell you in a second sort of how to think about, should I do traditional or should I do Roth? I'm not thinking that only the 13% of participants fall into the camp that should do Roth. I'm thinking a lot more folks should be doing it, should not just be thinking about the tax you're paying this year, but think about the tax that you'll pay over your entire financial life.
I share all the time that it takes just a little to create a lot because you're investing just a little bit today's happiness for that great, big, beautiful tomorrow. I can tell you that it's even better with Roth is because not only can you be a millionaire in the future, what if I told you could be a tax-free millionaire by just taking advantage of this employer Roth option? But a lot of you guys, you're not math and tax experts. So you're saying, I need some guidance. Give me some perspective. So we have created kind of a slide to walk you through the decision-making process on traditional versus Roth within your employment plan.
So if you think about where your income falls, if your combined marginal tax rate, that's the tax rate that you pay on your next dollar of income, right? You add up your federal marginal rate and your state marginal rate if you live in a state that has income taxes. If it's less than 25% between those two, you should really consider Roth because you are in historically a low tax position. And odds are in the future, as you build wealth, when you get into retirement, you're likely going to be in a higher tax rate environment. So the Roth would be a better option. Now, on the converse, if your combined marginal tax rate is greater than 30%, so your federal rate plus your state tax rate is above 30%, that current year tax benefit is really, really, really valuable. You may want to consider traditional because the tax benefit is just a little too valuable to walk away from, and there might be chances later in life for you to convert some Roth dollars or come up with ways for Roth. If you live in between, if your combined tax rate is somewhere in the 25 to 30% range, it gets a little grayer.
Yeah, and I'll even add, because I know I'm fully expecting it, people will post it into the YouTube comments because they do it every time when we compare Roth to traditional. They say those are apples and oranges because think about Roths don't get a current year tax deduction, whereas with your traditional, you do. So if you put the same tax rate in, aren't you just one is oversaving, the other is undersaving. There's zero difference between these two. You're a sucker for falling prey to this whole Roth versus traditional thing. I see these comments and they kind of blow my mind because there's a lot more going on. And I know that they're just trying to show us how smart they are. Because here's what the assumptions we're trying to think about. Yes, it's true with Roth. In essence, you are contributing more because you are not getting a current year tax deduction. You're giving after tax. So every dollar you put in Roth is a little bit more than you'd have to give if you're doing traditional. So that's actually can be somewhat of a positive that's requiring you to save more. But here's the ultimate thing that's running under the surface of all these calculations. If you're in the highest of high tax rates, you're hoping, because we always know retirees vote. And what do politicians, I don't care if you're red, blue, purple, whatever, on your political party, they typically are scared of the senior citizen block, so they give all kind of incentives. Think about all the states that have income taxes, but somehow they're tax-free on Social Security. They're tax-free on retirement distributions. They're tax-free on pensions. They don't do that with your wages. Why is that? Have you ever asked yourself, why are they so tax-free on all these retirement distributions? It's because they know who votes in each state. So there's a lot of things that can go into this recipe, is that likely when you retire some point in the future, when you also are now a retiree, there's going to be somebody who's going to vote in a tax policy, or the tax policy will already be established this way, that your income taxes will be lower in retirement. Plus, think about this. When you're no longer working a job, you're now living off of your portfolio. Plus, if you've done it the money guy way, we talk about this all the time, the 3-bucket strategy, you can legally manipulate how much you're going to pay income taxes on because you have multiple pots to pull off of. You got after-tax money, you got tax-deferred, that's all your employer match as well as your traditional contributions, and then you got tax-free, which is Roth. If you retire when you're 60, you got 12 years to kind of figure out how you want to manipulate your income and live off of this. You probably are going to be in a much lower tax bracket then than you are when you're working and earning your peak earning years. That's why we do make some assumptions. Now, look, if you're different and you know your income situation in retirement is going to put you in a much higher tax bracket than while you're working, then yeah, you have a different set of rules,
Sure.
a different set of assumptions, but that's not the majority of the people out there.